This is the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast, your source for the strategies, systems, and smarts you need to turn possibility into purpose. Every week, we dive into dynamic conversations as our host, Nicole Greer, interviews leadership and business experts. They're here to shed light on practical solutions to the challenges of personal and professional development. Now, here's your host, a professional speaker, coach, and consultant, Nicole Greer.
Welcome, everybody, to the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. My name is Nicole Greer, and they call me the Vibrant Coach. And I am here today with Bill. Let me read his bio and tell you all about him. There he is. He's waving to you. Go to the YouTube and watch this. So, Bill Shander is an author, educator, and information designer, helping clients turn their data into compelling visual and often interactive experiences. He teaches data storytelling, information design, and data visualization on LinkedIn Learning. He has 2 million plus learners that he has reached. And in his workshops around the world, he's doing all of this stuff. He is a keynote speaker and has lectured for graduate and undergraduate students and staff at Harvard, Northeastern, Stanford, and more. And his first book, which I have in my hot little hands, and if you're looking on the YouTube, it has all of these sticky notes hanging out of it. It's really awesome. It's an awesome book. It was published by Wiley earlier this year. So, Bill, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. What would you add to your bio?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me, Nicole. I'm very excited to be here. And let's see, what would I add to my bio? I have to say, I started my career doing web design and development, and then I started doing the data visualization as part of that. And then I started teaching. It's sort of been this evolution of my career. It kind of happened to me. It's not like I had a strategic plan for it all. But I love what I do. I'm also in the middle right now of a big move. I moved from Boston to New Mexico, and our new
Whoa.
house is going to be done in like 2 weeks. So like there's all kinds of craziness happening in life and on top of everything else. So yeah, it's been an interesting year or two writing the book, publishing the book, and big moves and all the rest of it. So
Okay, well,
it's all fun.
gosh. What city in New
Mm.
Mexico did you say?
Between Albuquerque and Santa Fe, it's a little town called Placitas.
Oh my gosh, don't you love it? Placitas. Ah,
So
so good. So good. That will be a big change for you. But I love both your
yeah.
towns, Boston, and I had an aunt that lived in Albuquerque, and we visited her, and we had this thing called pozole that will set
Oh
you
yes.
free.
The sole is very, very yummy for
Yeah,
sure.
that's right, that's right. Well, I congratulations on the book. It's a big deal to get your thoughts on paper and published, especially by Wiley. It's so good, and the name of it is fantastic. It's called Stakeholder Whispering. So first thing, you actually define it in the book, but just for people listening, will you define what a stakeholder is? Like set a nice foundation for us.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll even add that I really hate the word stakeholder.
Okay, sure.
And I almost didn't title the book with that word because it's a word that, depending on where you're coming from, it means different things. Like, PR people think of stakeholders as the public that's going to yell at them when they're trying to put some project in their backyard that they don't want. In work, a stakeholder is your boss, your project manager, whatever. And everyone has a different perspective on what that word means, but there's no better word. And so I used it. But yeah, the basic idea of what a stakeholder is, and this was defined by a professor at the University of Virginia who came up with this whole idea of stakeholder management. The basic idea is the stakeholder is anyone who can affect or is affected by whatever it is you're working on. So can affect or is affected by. So, like a boss, a client, someone who can affect, change, make you do it in this way is a stakeholder, but also people who are affected by, like the public who might be affected by that giant mine you want to dig in their backyard.
Oh Lord.
So it's a very broad term, but the way I'm usually referring to it, I'm thinking about things like bosses, clients, investors, people are sort of asking you to do things because you're working for them in some capacity. That's sort of my main sort of focus when I talk about stakeholders.
Okay, that's fantastic. And it's in his introduction. He defines it, lays it really beautifully out for you what a stakeholder is, and you've defined it here. And then also, what do you mean by whispering and why do I need to whisper to my stakeholders? Can you connect those two things for me?
Sure. Yeah, the basic idea, if I'm sure a lot of people have seen the movie, or I think there was a book before the movie, The Horse Whisperer. And the basic gist of it, way back in the late 18th century, was the first quote unquote horse whisperer. And it was somebody who, rather than like beating a horse into submission to train them, would just whisper in its ear. and then the horse would magically be tamed and do what they're supposed to do. And this stakeholder whispering is not taming our boss, taming our stakeholders, but it's essentially, speaking to them in a different way than we might otherwise in order to figure out what they really need from us before we do it. But the idea of horse whisperer, it's that magical way of engaging with another being, whether it's a horse or a stakeholder, in order to communicate effectively with them.
Right. And so when we say that we're going to be a stakeholder whisperer, we're going to do stakeholder whispering. What we're trying to do is uncover what people need before doing what they ask. That's the subtitle of the book, right?
Yeah,
So uncovering
yeah,
what people need. And I think people are going to really relate to this because I know a lot of times a leader will have an idea and it's not fully baked.
yes.
And so you're sitting there holding it. Okay, he wants me to do this. What should I do? You should be a stakeholder whisperer to figure out what this person really wants. Do I have that right?
100%. And I love that you used that phrase, not fully baked. Yesterday, I had my regular weekly LinkedIn live session where I bring on guests to talk about this idea of stakeholder whispering. And my guest yesterday said, and she's a boss, she is a senior leader. And she says, yeah, sometimes I ask my people to do something and I ask them for a cake and I give them the recipe, meaning she asks them for some sort of an outcome, but also tells them how to do it. And she said, but she's not interested in them following her recipe necessarily. She wants them to just get her a cake. And maybe that means finding a new recipe. So, yes, not fully baked. She knows her ideas aren't always fully baked, as no one's are. And she needs her people to figure out what's really needed. And the thing is, the human condition is full of
Mm,
this idea that our subconscious is driving the bus at all times. We don't really know what we need most of the time in our personal lives and in our work lives. So I know I'm trying to accomplish something and I'm going to phrase it and articulate it poorly, but I'm hoping that the people who work for me will sort of figure out what I really need or help me figure it out for myself. And then eventually we'll get to actually executing on the right project, the right task.
yeah, absolutely. And I love this book so much because it's about slowing down to go fast, but you talk about fast thinking and slow thinking in the book. So I have a brother who was in the military, and he was like, you've got these little jets up in the air and they're flying around going really fast, but they send up a tanker full of fuel and the jet has to slow down to get up with the tanker and it has to fill up with fuel and then they go out. And I
Yeah.
think that this stakeholder whispering is a little bit like that, right? Like you've got this boss who's like, we need to get this done and this done and this done and this done. It's really fast, but it's like, okay, but I need to make sure we've got fuel. I understand what we're doing to get this whole thing done. So it's a lot about the pace of our thinking as well. So will you talk about fast thinking, slow thinking? Will you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. So, if people have ever heard that term, that phrase, fast thinking, slow thinking, they may recognize it. It comes from a book that came out in 2011, I think, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winner. And he's not even, I don't know if it's all his research, or some of it's his, but some of it's others. It goes back for decades. The basic idea is that humans think in two ways. There's fast thinking, which is the instinctive, intuitive response. I'm walking through the forest, I hear rustling in the grass, and I run. Like I instinctively run because otherwise I might get eaten by a tiger, right? Even
Right.
though 99% of the time it's just a mouse, right? I'll be okay. But that's how I pass down my genes because I'll survive even when it is a tiger. And the instinctive response works really well in that circumstance. But there's also what we call slow thinking, which is when we, to your point, we slow it down, we pause, and we try to reason. We try to think that, okay, well, I hear rustling in the grass, but it could be a mouse. It could be a tiger. It could also be a dog. It could be my own footsteps. Maybe there's an echo. And we sort of process and imagine and analyze. And the thing about fast and slow thinking, fast thinking is it just happens instantaneously. It's subconscious, and slow thinking requires intention and reasoning, etc. Turns out we're not very good at slow thinking, according to Kahneman and others. Our slow thinking brain, as he referred to it, is lazy. So we'll slow things down and try to reason through things, but we kind of don't really do it very well. We essentially substitute easier questions to answer rather than the one that our fast brain is going to answer sort of automatically. And there's all kinds of other ways our slow thinking fails us. The long story short, at work, When your boss is going boom, 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 you need to do this, 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 that is fast thinking, and they're just doing things in the usual way. We're launching a new product, we need a brochure. We're launching a new product, we need a brochure. Maybe we don't need a brochure if we slow it down and we really think that through. Or maybe we need a brochure, but maybe it should be a big giant poster size instead of a little trifold. Like, rethink what you really need by slowing it down, which is hard to do.
Yeah, I love that. And in your book, you actually have icons. Got kind of a flavor of a book for dummies in terms of it's got like little things in the margin. And I love
Yeah,
books for dummies. If y'all know what I mean, the series, cooking for dummies, IT for dummies, whatever the thing may be. You've got little
yeah,
icons in here. And so you've even got an icon that says, as you're reading this book, slow down. Because I think a lot of
yeah.
people are skimmers, don't you?
100%. And I know I do that. Like, I'll read a book and I'll get to the end of the book and I'll say, I like that book. And do you remember anything in it? Yeah, maybe one or two things. So yeah, I really, because the entire idea of stakeholder whispering is about stopping the intuitive automated response. Like, if I had to sum it up in like one sentence, it's like, stop doing things in the normal way and just think about it, and then approach it, more strategically. And so yeah, I really wanted people to like slow it down and stop at this moment in the book. And there are a bunch of places in the book where I literally say, okay, now put the book down and walk away for an hour, because I want you to really percolate, allow the ideas to percolate, because it's so easy to skim it and just skip past it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you go on to say there's two more things that you need to do while you're reading the book is think about a state of puzzlement or the Greek word aporia. Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So talk about puzzlement.
Yeah, so the primary technique that I am describing to use in the book in order to uncover what people need before doing what they ask is
Hmm.
the Socratic method. And the basic idea of the Socratic method, a lot of people remember hearing about that in school, maybe at some point in their lives. And everybody tends to, if you do remember it, we tend to remember that, oh, it's something to do with asking questions, right? And the Socratic method is definitely asking questions. But what most people forget is that the Socratic method specifically is not asking questions to learn something yourself. I don't ask my boss what they meant by that request in order to learn the answer. That will also happen, but it's actually the other way around. The Socratic method is asking somebody questions to help them learn. The
Hmm.
direction is going that way. And so the basic idea is, my stakeholder asks me to do something that may or may not be what they actually need. I ask them questions so that they can figure it out. So they can discover, oh yeah, really, I meant for you to do X instead of Y. Then I'll do that. Now, to your question, aporia is a Greek word that means puzzlement, and Socrates defined the Socratic method. Not that he called it that, but he said that what he was doing is he was asking questions of his students to teach them, and the goal was to push his students into a state of aporia. So he was literally peppering his students with questions to confuse them. And eventually they'd be so confused, and they'd have to sort of slow it down, stop and think. And from their confusion, their puzzlement, they could emerge with the insight. So it's part of the learning process. And so when we're dealing with our stakeholders, we need to ask them questions with the intention not just to learn ourselves, but to help them discover for themselves what they actually need from us. And there will be a moment in a perfect scenario when there is a deeper idea to be found, where yes, they may get slightly puzzled. They may say, oh wait, yeah, I didn't think about that way before. You're right. We don't need a brochure. What we need is a new website, or whatever the actual ask could have been, rather than the automated instantaneous response that they came up with.
Right, right. Yeah. And you talk about the Socratic method. It's actually on page 48. I had that written down as something I wanted to ask you about. Well, the book is broken up into parts, right? And so the first part of the book, what you talk about there is the what and the why. And your first chapter is called Nothing is as It Seems. I love that perspective because I have a mentor. Her name's Ann Starrett, and like I'll tell her something, like I'll be like, da da da, this is what I think, and she'll look at me and she'll go, "Well, we don't really know." Or you've got to figure it out. You can't just assume, right? Is that a little
Yeah,
bit about what we're talking there?
that's it.
Okay, the what and the why. So we talk about the what and the why of being a stakeholder whisperer.
Yeah, I mean, the first and most important idea is exactly what you just said. Nothing should be taken for granted.
Hmm.
There is, I don't want to say that there is no truth, there is no reality, but it's kind of almost that, right?
It's kind of
um,
fuzzy in this life.
Everything is fuzzy, everything is gray area. And, in the context of work, okay, your boss says, do X. Mm, I don't know. Maybe X isn't the best thing. Maybe you don't actually know what you really need. I'm sure you have a strategy, you have somewhere you're trying to get to, but maybe we should figure out what the fully baked idea is. And I think that, one of the most important ideas about stakeholder whispering about the why and the what is accepting that the base condition, the first idea, the fast thinking, all of it is a starting point. And it doesn't mean it's worthless. It's not all nonsense to be thrown out. That's the starting point. Everything requires a little bit of investigation before you move on and start working on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And in chapter 2, you use a great reference to the Rolling Stones, who I absolutely adore, right? That's my generation. We need
Yeah,
more Rolling Stones and less Coldplay. And so the famous line is, so you get what you need, right? So
exactly.
will you talk a little bit about that for us, like asking for things?
Yeah, so I start off with the Coldplay quote, which comes from one of their songs. And I'm going to butcher the quote now because I don't have it in front of me. But the basic idea of the quote is, maybe you have it in front of you. Maybe you can read it if you have it quickly
Yeah, let me
accessible. 'Cause
see if I
I don't want to get it wrong.
yeah, let me see if I can find it. Hold on. We
We-
don't have to be fast. We don't have to be quick thinkers right now. We can be messy.
All right.
I got it. I got it. I got it. Okay.
Okay.
Coldplay expressed the idea perfectly. When you try your best, but you don't succeed. When you get what you want, but not what you need.
Yes. So that's the lyric from their song. I think it's from Fix You. Yeah, you
Uh-huh.
get what you want, but not what you need. And bosses tend to get what they want, what they ask for, but it's not what they need sometimes. And to your point, the Rolling Stones said the very similar idea, but the exact opposite. They said you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need.
That's
And
right.
so, yeah, I want us to find a place where we can live a little bit more in the Rolling Stones mode where, yeah, maybe you can't get what you want, boss. You may not get that cake that you asked for, but we're going to get you what you need. We're going to give you a different type of cake that's really delivering on what you actually need, which is more important than what you thought you wanted.
Yeah. And, as I read the book and as I'm listening to, I talk to people at the mid level of management and they're listening to the folks in the C suite. And oftentimes they're closer to the problem, they're closer to the customer stakeholder, you know.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great book to read in order to lead up. Right, like the stakeholder whispering is that old-fashioned thing we called leading up, and so I think it's fantastic and
Yeah.
giving you the tips and techniques to do that. I think it's a really great book, really awesome.
And by the
All right,
way, that brings up a hugely important point, which is
please, please,
that
please.
there's always multiple stakeholders, right? So you just said it. Your customer is a stakeholder, right?
Yes,
They are the ones using your product, your service, whatever. Your boss is also your stakeholder. They're asking you to do stuff. But your boss needs reminding that the customer stakeholder is who it's all for. Now, you may need reminding from your boss that, well, your investors are also a stakeholder or, whoever. And so prioritize, list all your stakeholders, prioritize them, and figure out what to do for each of them as best you can.
yeah, and back to what you said, which is chapter 6 in the book, is about asking questions. And I'm a coach, and when you're talking about the Socratic method and asking what I would call powerful questions, I just get all excited because that's what we do in coaching, right? Is we ask these questions to get the other
Yeah,
person to learn or get them to have a new connection in their neural passageways or whatever, right? We're really trying to
yeah.
help this person out. I think this is really powerful to learn how to do these things. Okay, all right. So we got to help people get what they need. It may not be what they think they want. Okay, that's where I'm landing. Do I have that right, Bill? Am I good?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. All right, so then you talk about everything is UX, UX standing for user experience. So will you share with us kind of how this foundationally fits in with the what and the why of stakeholder whispering?
Yeah, it's something that, I used to do web design and development years ago. And in the world of design, we talk about user experience, especially interactive design, all the time. It's part of like the language of what we do. We recognize that we have people who use the things we create, websites, apps, whatever, and we're trying to create an experience for them that works, that's easy to use, accomplishes the task they're going for, et cetera. Outside of that world of design and interactive experience, that phrase, that term, that idea of user experience is sort of a new idea. Although there are similar ideas like customer experience that some industries are starting to talk about. But when you wrap your head around the idea that every single thing that you do is creating an experience for somebody else, I don't
Mhm.
care like what you're doing. Starbucks doesn't sell coffee. They create an experience around the joy of drinking a cup of coffee in a nice space with, your laptop out, et cetera. Banks don't lend you money. They create an experience with that money because you have to like call them on the phone, and that's a horrible experience. The phone tree, and you go into the bank, and waiting in line for an hour is a horrible experience. And like, so there can be good experiences, there can be bad experiences. So whether it's a B2B or B2C, whether you're selling services or products, it's all an experience. And the reason I think it's important to look at it that way is that an experience reminds you, I'm not selling widgets, I am dealing with humans. And to your point you just made a moment ago, that's my customer stakeholder. And when you reorient your mind to thinking about that, you remember, yeah, I have to think about what does that person need from me? And yes, my boss, I'm creating an experience when I'm working with them. What do they need from me? And so it just allows you to sort of rethink how you approach everything when you remember that it's all about experience. And I'm not the first person to say this. There's a very famous school of design called design thinking, which is all
Oh,
about creating an experience when you're designing anything. And design is not just making pretty pictures, it's creating these experiences for users.
ah, that's so good. And, the word culture pops off the page because, that's what I'm trying to talk about on my end of things. And so you say on page 30, we finally broadly believe in user experience as culture. Businesses generally understand that asking customers to tell them what to do isn't the answer. We know that we need a more nuanced approach to creating solutions to real challenges, whether in product design, HR policies, supply chain reporting, or any of the endless tasks. That's why we call it user experience or customer development or design thinking or anything else. It's people and purpose. So I love that in there that culture is also the user experience. What I was thinking when I was reading this is like, oh my gosh, I got to get up with Bill. How do we get this in the DNA of an organization where everybody has like a stakeholder whisperer mindset, right?
Yeah.
So that the culture is very concerned about making sure people get what they need, not just what they want. We're not just, offering up whatever it is that's being asked for, and we're really doing great work. I think it would shift a culture. Do you have an experience or a thought about a company that's put this in place and what they're experiencing from a culture standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this, that I've spoken to a lot of companies since the book came out. One client of mine is a consulting firm, and their HR group essentially got the book, gave the book to a bunch of their staff. I did a little talk where I sort of introduced the ideas of the book, and then they had like almost like a book group session afterwards, and like they did some role playing and some exercises. And I spoke with her recently, and the CHRO, and she said that they're still talking about the book, that the ideas are
That's
percolating,
good.
and it's really good. And so it's starting to seep into the culture within the HR department, which is of course very good because
Linchpin.
from
Yeah.
HR, that's where culture might expand because then they'll maybe bleed it out into training programs or whatever else. But the fact that they recognized that this is something that they need to do, not just the leadership, but the other people, the mid-level people were like, yeah, we need to do this. We know we need to do it, and we're not good at it. We don't know how to do it. Which brings up a really good question that I get all the time where people say, and you mentioned the idea of managing up before,
Hmm.
it's hard to do. It's hard to push your boss and say, well, okay, you said you want X, but I think maybe you might need Y. And how to conduct those conversations is difficult. And when you have a culture, to your point, that accepts that this must occur, then those conversations are much more comfortable and much easier to have.
Yeah. And the other thing that just popped in my head just this moment is, I talk a lot when I'm talking about people about how to build a vibrant culture. The first question I ask the individuals in my training is I say, what is it like to experience you? Back to user
Mm,
experience. And
yeah.
a lot of people are like, "Huh, I've never really thought about that before." And I'm like, "Well, it's high time you did." Because the experience of Bill and the experience of Nicole is the experience around this person, which creates the culture or the work environment that people are working in. And I think what I love so much about your book is that it's helping you to do what you need to do to maybe remove a little bit of ego that might be at play.
Yeah. And it's hard because you're hoping that your boss's ego will be removed too. So the boss is reading this. Hopefully they'll be introspective and realize they need to remove their ego a little bit. And then yeah, for the rest of us who are managing up, it's hard to do. You have to do it with humility. You have to do it with, an Ivy chapter on curiosity, right? So, you have to be authentically, genuinely curious. And when you're authentically curious and you authentically, genuinely want to do the best you can for your company, sometimes that includes, yes, saying, hey, boss, I get the strategy, I get the direction, I get what you're trying to accomplish. Did you ever think about maybe doing it this way? And to help them really get what they need. And when you do it with a genuine authenticity, a goal of collective goodness, then it's going to be better received. But I love that idea. What is the experience of you? That's a great question.
Oh, and it stuns people because it's kind of like this whole thing, like they think that, the world is the problem or the world is dangerous and
Yeah,
they're not dangerous. It's like, we all have a lot of
yeah,
work to do. You mentioned the HR department. I'm just having another thought. You're going to have to write a second book, probably, Bill. And it's gonna be like stakeholder whispering. It's going to be like employee whispering, which is the same thing,
yeah,
I think. But like from an HR perspective, I'm an old HR gal, and a lot of HR people listen to this podcast. We have so many one-on-one conversations with employees, and if we
yeah,
could remove ego and help them see the lesson and why they're in the HR office or whatever, I think it would be super helpful. So this is for all
yeah.
HR. Okay.
Are you ready to build your vibrant culture? Bring Nicole Greer to speak to your leadership team, conference, or organization to help them with their strategies, systems, and smarts to increase clarity, accountability, energy, and results. Your organization will get lit from within. Email her at nicole@vibrantculture.com and be sure to check out Nicole's TEDx talk at vibrantculture.com.
All right. So the second part of the book, the first part's what and why, and the second part is how ideas. So now you're going to give us some ideas on actually how to do this thing, right? So will you
Yeah.
kind of jump into how do you do stakeholder whispering?
Yeah. And so, I can't remember not having the book in front of me, the exact, like I may mention some things that come even in the later section, because I know you're going to talk about the third section is like the how, hands-on specific techniques.
Right.
But the how big ideas are things like curiosity that I just mentioned, right? You
Hmm.
have to be curious and genuinely wanting to improve the state of your organization
Right.
and accomplish real, strategic tasks. And actually, I keep using the word strategic for a reason,
Yeah,
and
I
I don't
love
think I
that
talked about
word.
it that much in the book. Okay, yeah, it's so important. It's like, I think that any success I've had in my career is because I never looked at what I did as a bunch of tasks. I need to design this, program that, create an interactive experience, XYZ. It was always, well, like, why? Like, why are we doing this to accomplish a goal? And when
Mhm.
you have that strategic viewpoint, you're going to do better work and you're going to be more valued in your organization because people recognize you as somebody who actually wants to achieve things that are for the greater good of the organization. So curiosity is super important. Empathy is
Mhm.
also really important. You have to be empathetic to your boss, right? Like essentially, you have to understand where they are coming from, why they might be suggesting X, Y, or Z. And I keep saying boss, but any stakeholder, client, investor, whoever, why they're asking you for it and why they're asking for it in this way. and the best way that you can engage with them and speak with them in order to help them discover the true underlying need that they're going for. So there's a lot of ideas like that, like what are sort of the attributes that will help you be a better stakeholder whisperer before we move on to start talking about the specific tasks related to that.
Okay, fantastic. So the how is more like how do I need to be before when I use these tools, right? Like how do I need to
Yeah.
be? Like okay. All right, I think that's
And
really
one of them, by the
helpful.
way, is to remember that I don't care whether you're day one junior employee, mid-level manager, or C-suite. Because even the C-suite has stakeholders, right? They're talking to the board or the CEO or whoever.
Mhm.
We all have stakeholders, and I don't care where you are on that chain, you have a right and a responsibility to do this. If you're day one junior person just entered your job, yeah, you're not going to do it quite as aggressively as a C-suite person, but you know what? You still should be asking clarifying questions before you jump in and start doing stuff. And again, maybe it's a little bit less, it's a little bit toned back. Maybe it's like one question to start it off, but we all belong where we are in our work and have a responsibility to try to get to the strategic goals before we jump in and do tasks.
Yeah. And I think really when you're talking about that junior person, asking the questions of like their mid-level manager, I think at the end of the day, the mid-level manager is so grateful that that person is asking questions. So I think that's such a good encouragement you gave there. I often say this in one of my programs. I teach how to have good meetings. And I think this has everything to do with having a good meeting.
Yeah,
Stakeholder whispering, where I just think it has everything to do with a good meeting. But you know how leaders are at the end of the meeting, they'll be like, "Does anybody have any questions?" I mean,
yeah,
like the last thing they say. And I tell
it's
my
true.
leaders, knock it off. Stop saying that at the end of your meeting. Instead, say, I need 5 questions before we get out of here so we have clarity.
Yeah,
And then I make the joke that, if you don't get any questions because everybody's like, no, I'm just ready to get out of this meeting, then people have what I call the meeting after the meeting.
right.
And they're standing
It's very
around
true.
going, I have a lot of questions about this project. It's like
Yeah,
the leader asked you
it's
if
so
you
true.
had any questions, but if you became a stakeholder whisperer, you would see like, you need to ask the questions, right? So
Yeah.
you can give this person what they need. That's
And by
so
the way,
good.
like one of the other how big ideas is
Yeah.
active listening, right?
All right.
Which is a really interesting topic. Yeah. And you have to listen really closely and really intently, which means you're not formulating your follow-up or your defensive response or your next question while you're listening. You're really listening and engaging, your brain. Now, you may have to be taking notes, you may have to be doing things like that. But that does not mean, even though you're actively listening, you can't help it. You're gonna formulate questions, things that you're not quite sure about. Oh, I don't even know what this means. So you circle it, and then at the end of the meeting, when the boss says, "Give me 5 questions," you probably should have some. So listening doesn't mean not also engaging your brain, but it does mean like trying your best to sort of disengage your intuitive response to what you're hearing. It's really, really, listening thoughtfully without reacting too much.
Right, right. Yeah. So that just is such a coaching moment right there. So, Bill, I got my first little coaching certificate back in 2007 and it changed me. Like
Yeah,
I was supposed to get coaching so I could help other people, but really I had a huge shift in who I was because we practiced on each other. And
yeah,
they told us the very thing that you just said. They said there's 3 levels of listening. The first level of listening is I'm just listening to respond. I'm calculating, I'm judging, I'm doing all my fast thinking that you're talking about. Level 2 is like really listening for what's between the words and the values and the concepts and the needs of this other person. And level 3 is like watching body language and just all these things. So active listening, don't ask a bunch of questions if you're not ready to listen. I just very good.
yeah,
Made me
yeah.
happy talking about listening. All right. Okay. Now I want to talk about chapter 7 for a second. It's still in the how, and this is the how of how I need to be in order to go do the how of the whispering. But it's called useful paranoia, which that's a great chapter title. Talk about useful paranoia. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So useful paranoia, another way of saying it, it's critical thinking. but I didn't want to use that term because
No,
critical
it's
thinking,
boring.
it's too loaded in a lot of different ways. Yeah, and it's boring. Useful paranoia, I just love thinking about it that way because the basic idea is, if we go back to the very beginning of the book, nothing is as it seems. Okay. If nothing is as it seems, then I should be essentially paranoid at all times that there's a horrible mistake about to happen. Something's going wrong. This is a wrong idea. There must be something else going on here. But of course, complete paranoia is destabilizing and not really good for your mental health, et cetera. So you don't want to be completely paranoid. And that's where useful, the word useful comes into play. So useful paranoia, like I question everything, but I do it in a thoughtful way. And so, yeah, you have to have that state of mind. Nothing is as it seems, therefore, everything should be investigated. And eventually I'll get past it. Eventually the paranoia goes away. I'm like, okay, I think I found what I'm supposed to be doing and I can move on. But you have to have that sort of frame of mind, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing just kind of bubbled up when you were talking. We've got our stakeholders around, our boss, as we're talking about, is asking us for something, and we make assumptions about what the boss, like, why is he asking me to do this?
Yeah.
Why why doesn't he give this to her to do? She's better at this than me, or, I thought he was going to give me higher level things to do and he's giving me this lower level thing to do. So I think even before we start to think about how to do the task we've been given, is like there's a lot of other paranoia that comes up inside of people. But to understand that you're jumping to conclusions, and maybe it's a little bit of emotional intelligence too that needs to kind of
Yeah.
seep in there. Yeah. Like it's not
That's
personal.
definitely true.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Okay,
for
all right.
sure.
So we have the what and the why, and then we have the how ideas, which is like, how do I need to be while I'm doing my stakeholder whispering? And now we're going to go to how hands on, which is part 3 of the book. And so chapter 12 is also funny. Let me just say, Bill is a funny person. Like when you read his book, it's like he's talking to you, okay? Which I absolutely adore. It's not like
Thank you.
researchy, although he has tons of quotes. And I think science is all up in this book, backwards and forwards and bookmarked and all the things. All right. So chapter 12 says how to run a therapy session, which I think is
Yeah.
great because work sometimes feels like that. So you talk again about the Socratic method in there, and you talk about asking questions again. But will you talk a little bit about how to actually run the inquiry, the whispering?
Yeah, well, it's funny. You mentioned it before, and I was gonna follow up then, but I'm glad that we have an opportunity to now. You said
Yeah. Okay.
that when you started doing coaching, first of all, it helped you, but
Whew.
you also said that in coaching, you ask questions to help them, your mentee or coachee figure out what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot like therapy, doesn't it? Right? And
100%.
I've always joked in my world of design, as an example, that it's always like therapy. When a client comes and says, "Oh, we need a new logo." Well, what do you want the logo to be about? Well, we want it to look like this and do that and blah blah blah. Well, tell me more about like the bones of this organization. Tell me more about what is this company really about? And it's very much like a therapeutic session. It's like you get to like the heart of the matter about the culture and all kinds of other things in design conversations. Long story short, therapy is the best metaphor because therapy specifically uses the Socratic method. Therapy is all about, a patient comes in, they've suffered some sort of trauma or they want to work through whatever issues they're trying to work through. The therapist doesn't say, okay, go do 10 push-ups and you'll be all better, right? Or go write in your journal for an hour. They say, how did that make you feel? Right? They ask you questions and they ask you more questions. They said, well, when did this happen? How old were you? And, tell me more about that day. And, how did you feel afterwards? And did you talk to anybody? It's all questions. And so the way, therapists run a therapy session, I thought would be instructive. And so I read some books and articles about how that works. And it was exactly like I keep saying, it's the Socratic method. It's digging in to someone's psyche, but they're doing the digging. You're not doing the digging. You're not telling them what to do. You're not even like, trying to probe them to get the answer. You're trying to trigger in them the introspection to find the answer themselves. And so that's the whole idea here. Like your boss wants you to do task X, and you're going to question it, not to be a pain in the butt, but because you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. And when you ask those questions, they're going to be introspective. They're going to think about what are they really trying to accomplish. So it's therapy. I mean, it's truly what the process is like.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And then the next thing you talk about is practicing empathy. right?
Yeah.
And I'll say another thing that I've noticed, in all my years of doing HR and investigations and things, is like an employee will look up to the boss, and that's their stakeholder, but they will have disdain for their leader because they think their leader's not that bright, or their
Yeah.
leader doesn't understand, or their leader can't see something, right? And so we judge it. He can't even see what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
there's this attitude of judging, but, like, "Oh my gosh, he doesn't understand what's going on." Like, there's a difference
Yeah.
between those 2 things. There's, like, this judgy part, and there's this, like, "Oh, I better help him see what's going on." And that's so much
Yeah.
better for everybody if you can help the leader see by empathizing that he's got a blindfold on, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And like, this book in particular could easily be read from the perspective of, oh, bosses are clueless. We'll help them figure it out and then we'll do the right thing. Yeah, I try to say again and again and again in the book, yeah, that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to like, laugh at them. We're not here to put them down. We're not here
Right,
to say anything bad about
right, to
them.
be
It
condescending.
is
Right, right.
yeah, it's all about empathy. Like, I get it. Like, bosses are busy. Bosses have 1,200 other people they're trying to deal with to get them to do tasks. They've got a million things going on. And so they're going to be fast thinking and assigning tasks, and it's inevitable. And by the way, it's the human condition. You
Yes,
and I and all of us are also doing the exact same thing. And so, yeah, we have to have empathy for them. We have to, as best we can, understand where they're coming from, why these things might be missed, and just acknowledging that everybody does it, and therefore we can try to help them get there by asking good questions. But empathy is absolutely critical. Otherwise, yes, to your point, you're going to have disdain, you're going to feel superior, and that's not what it's about.
not at all, not at all. Yeah, and here's the thing, if you think about it, if you are the person helping the leader see, you'll turn into this thing that I often tell, employees when I'm going in counseling with them. I'm like, "You're gonna end up being their wingman."
Yeah,
Which is, I think the number 2 position is a very good position to be in. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You're the internal trusted advisor. And so if you can practice these hands-on how things, I think it's really important. Now, I love lean and Six Sigma stuff. And you have the 5 whys in here on page 110.
yeah,
So it's in the chapter called Starting Broad and Digging Deep. So we're in the therapy session. We're having empathy for
yeah.
our leader, and we're going to start broad and then dig deep. Will you talk a little bit about doing that and the 5 whys? Because I think that's a wonderful tool.
Yeah, the basic idea is we're doing the Socratic method. We're asking them questions, and the 5 whys is just an amazing technique to get to the true underlying issue at hand. And so, for those of you who haven't heard of the 5 whys, the story that I've always heard to describe it comes from Toyota. Mr. Toyota himself, launched Toyota Motor Company, goes to the factory one day. And by the way, this story is actually not true. I've since discovered it because when Mr. Toyota, the grandfather, whatever, was actually involved, it wasn't even a car company yet. So, take it all with a grain of salt, but the lesson is so good. He goes to the factory and the line is down and there's no cars coming off the line. And he says, "Why is the line down?" That's the first why, right? And somebody says, "Oh, the machine broke." "Oh, why did the machine break?" "Well, one of the gears snapped off because something got stuck in the machine." "Why did something get stuck on the machine?" "Somebody bumped into the machine and knocked something off." Okay, why did somebody bump into the machine? "Well, there was water on the floor." "Why was there water on the floor?" "Because the custodian was out sick." So you finally figured out that the issue isn't like a manufacturing quality issue. It's not a maintenance issue for the machinery, et cetera, et cetera. But the real problem was a staffing issue with the custodial staff. So you have to ask multiple whys before you finally discover the true underlying issue at hand. And that's the basic idea here. We start broad. We may ask big questions. Why is this happening? Why do you really think you need X, Y, or Z? But you dig deeper and deeper and deeper and more detailed and eventually discover what really needs to be done.
So good. All right. And then on page 111, which is still in chapter 14, starting broad and digging deep, you've got the gist of powerful questions. You say the dance of the 6 W's, the who, what, when, where, how, why. So will you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about asking questions that begin with those starter words?
Yeah, and I was a journalist, trained as a journalist, and we learned that you got to include those questions or answers to those questions in every article you write, and as close to the beginning as possible. Who, what, when, where, why. And that's good advice for an article. But the reason the questions are very powerful is those part of all the questions you're going to want to ask anyways. Why are we creating this thing? Who is it for? When is it due, etc.? But the key to the dance of the six W's is the dancing around part. Because if you remember the Socratic method, we're trying to get our audience or our respondent into a state of aporia, that puzzlement, that moment where they see things in a different way. And when we're
Mhm.
jumping from a what to a why, to a when, to a how, to a when, to a how, to a why, slight imbalance it gets, especially when we realize that some of those questions are what's called divergent questions. Why? There's an endless answer to why. And some of them are convergent questions. When? Due next Thursday. Like, and when you have divergent and convergent questions together and you're bouncing in between the two, there's this, first of all, comfort, discomfort that happens because some people are more comfortable with one type of question than the other.
Mhm.
And broad open-ended questions are expansive and I can go on and on about them. And then the short convergent questions are boom, boom, boom. And this imbalance naturally will occur. And again, you're not trying to confuse your stakeholders like he's actually was doing, but the result will be this moment of, oh, wait, yeah, hold on. I never saw it that way. And that's the moment where your stakeholders finally gonna be like, yeah, I don't need what I said I needed. Maybe I need this. So it's just the opportunity for that insight to occur.
So good, so good. I hadn't thought about the convergent, and I think that's so good. You just taught me something. That's why I do this, everybody.
Right.
And I hope you listeners listening to this are like, oh my gosh, we love Bill. He's the best. He's teaching us all about this thing, stakeholder whispering. I love it. All right, so let's talk about one more kind of how to. You say chapter 23. Let's talk about bias, baby. So boy, that word bias is out there everywhere. And we have
Yeah.
them. We have little lenses and glasses we have on. So will you talk about how bias might enter into our stakeholder whispering?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the very beginning of the book. Nothing is as it seems. And because
Right.
we are flawed humans, every
Mhm.
single experience you have is filtered through a bias of one kind or another. And we're not talking about like, social biases, right? Although that's also a thing, right?
Oh,
But we're
that's out
talking
there
about,
too. Mhm.
yeah, but here it's just basic subconscious psychological bias. And I give a few examples in the book. And like, a simple one just for people to relate to is, there's a very, very famous like math problem called the bat and the ball problem. And if I said to you, all right, a bat costs $1 more than a ball, and the two together cost $1.10. How much is the ball and how much is the bat? The instinctive fast thinking response is one number, but the correct response is a slightly different number. And if you slow things down and think it through, you might get to the correct answer versus the instinctive automated response. That's actually also part of a psychological bias. There's a bias at play and why we think a certain way. We anchor things. So in that case, it's $1 and it's $1.10. One's $1 and the other must be $1.10, right? No, no, no. You anchor it on a number. That's a psychological bias versus thinking it through and slowing things down. There are a million and one of these biases. There's actually a great graphic out there, and I can't remember what it's called. But long story short, it's like a wheel, and around the wheel is a list of every single psychological bias, and there's literally dozens of them. There's like a
Oh, we're
hundred of
Googling
these
mad.
things.
Everybody's Googling like mad right now, Bill.
Yeah, yeah. And I list a whole bunch of them in the book that sort of talk about how these particular biases play in different ways and how we approach these things. But long story short, our brains do all kinds of weird things, and every time there's an opportunity for you to be thinking A when really the answer is B, but A is the way your brain is going to just by default. So it's also tied to the fast thinking, slow thinking. We gotta assume useful paranoia at all times that our first response might not be correct. So probe it, and then maybe you'll discover the correct answer.
That's right. And he does have a list of biases in the book on page 175, 176, and 177. So really, really good. So the very last part of the book is kind of like your final thoughts, and it's now what? All right. So we've talked about the what and the why. We've talked about how I need to be. I need to be a great active listener. I need to ask these powerful questions. I need to have empathy. I need to take a good look at my listening or my biases, right? And so you've given us some tools. So now if somebody read this book, what do they do? What are your instructions? What should we do next? How do we get this going?
Yeah. I mean, the first piece of advice is do it. Like literally the next time you sit down, your boss says, go do X, and especially if you're a junior, right? Even if you just start off by asking one question, and it's the most important question to start off with almost always, anyways. All right, boss, you want me to do X? I heard you. How are we going to measure success when I accomplish X? Because that's like the opening question to
Mm,
start to figure out what really needs to happen. Because if they say, all right, we need a new brochure for the new, how are we going to measure success? Well, we're going to have an article in the New York Times about it. How's a brochure going to do that? Oh, yeah, you're right. If we want an article, maybe a brochure isn't the right thing. Literally, that question alone can start to get you down the pathway.
that's
Um,
right.
so yeah, just start by doing it. And related to that is acknowledging something that we sort of alluded to earlier. Managing is not always so easy, and part of this is also recognizing that not all of our stakeholders are whisperable. There's going to be stakeholders who are more
Mhm.
amenable to this, where the culture is more oriented towards this, et cetera. And there's going to be some, don't tell anybody, but some
Everybody,
bosses
listen
are,
up.
yeah, some bosses are jerks, and
They
they don't
are.
want you to bug them.
Bless
They're
their
just like, do
heart.
what I said. But, so your job is to find a new boss. If you're stuck with a boss like that,
Oh, amen.
find a
Get
new
your resume
culture.
together. Mhm.
Yeah. But when you find that company, that organization where the culture has percolated out and your boss is open to these conversations as they should be, because better work will happen when we do it, then, it starts with you actually, being usefully paranoid, engaging in these Socratic dialogues with your stakeholders, and, you know, better stuff will happen. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I think so too. I absolutely love this book. All right, everybody, all my friends out there, I want you to go out and get this book. It's Stakeholder Whispering by Bill Shander. There it is. Uncover what people need before doing what they ask. I think this could be a game changer for you. And, it's going to build trust. Well, we didn't talk about that, but that was the other thing I thought. I wrote in the margins at one point. I'm like, this is going to build a lot of trust
Yeah.
between stakeholders if they slow down and spend some quality time doing all this together. So good,
Yeah.
so good. Bill, if people want to get a hold of you, I know that you're on the LinkedIn. Where else could they get a hold of you? What do you want to give us so we can call you and we can talk to you about your book and your all your work?
Sure. Yeah. You can always find me at my website, which is just my name, billshander.com, and or
Okay.
on this LinkedIn. So good.
Okay. And if you go to billshander.com, you can also get a free ebook preview. Do I have that right?
That is
That's what
correct.
Okay. All right. Very good. We would love for y'all to go do that. And also, if you enjoyed picking up all these nuggets from Bill today, would you go down just for a hot second and click, the thumbs up? It only takes a hot second. And if you really did enjoy it and you got a nugget, why don't you share with Bill the big takeaway that you got from this? And of course, I always appreciate all of you listening to the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. Bill, thank you so much. And do you have all of your things packed? He said that he's moving to New Mexico. Are you packed? Are you ready to go? Are the pictures padded up,
Yeah.
ready to get in the U-Haul?
What's funny is we sold our place like 8 months ago, and we've been
Oh
sort of
no!
traveling around, and now the new house is almost done being built. So yeah, all that stuff is in storage to be unpacked soon. Thank you.
Oh, very good. All right. Everybody, thanks again for listening to the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more like minded listeners. Remember, the journey to building a vibrant culture never stops. Stay inspired, keep nurturing your vibrant culture, and we can't wait to reconnect with you on the next exciting episode of the Build a Vibrant Culture podcast.